Imagine buying one of the most valuable places on Earth for less than the price of a modern smartphone. It sounds impossible. But more than 400 years ago, a deal took place that would become one of the most famous real estate transactions in history. According to the popular story, the Dutch bought the entire island of Manhattan for what later became known as just $24. Today, Manhattan is worth trillions of dollars. It is home to Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange, Broadway, Times Square, and some of the most expensive real estate on the planet. Every single day, billions of dollars move through this tiny island. Millions of people dream of living there. But here's the question. How could anyone sell such an extraordinary place for only $24? Was it the greatest business deal ever made? Did the Native Americans really agree to sell their land? Or has history misunderstood the entire story? Because the truth is far more fascinating than the legend. To uncover what really happened, we need to travel back more than 4 centuries, long before New York became the city that never sleeps, long before skyscrapers dominated the skyline, to a time when Manhattan was nothing but forests, rivers, wildlife, and the homeland of the Lenape people. This is the true story behind one of history's most famous and most misunderstood land deals. Long before the skyscrapers, long before Wall Street, long before New York became one of the world's greatest cities, Manhattan was a completely different place. Dense forests covered the island. Crystal clear rivers flowed through untouched landscapes. Eagles soared overhead. Deer, black bears, and countless other animals roamed freely. But Manhattan was far from empty. For thousands of years, it was home to the Lenape people. The Lenape were skilled hunters, fishermen, traders, and farmers who had built thriving communities across the region. They understood the rivers, forests, and changing seasons better than anyone else. To them, the land was not something to be bought or sold. It was something to be respected, shared among families, and protected for future generations. Their culture was deeply connected to nature. Every forest, every stream, and every hill carried meaning. They believed people belonged to the land, not that the land belonged to people. For centuries, this way of life remained unchanged. But everything was about to change. In the early 17th century, strange wooden ships appeared on the horizon. They carried explorers from across the Atlantic. And with them came an idea of land ownership that would forever transform the history of Manhattan. In the year 1609, a single voyage changed the future of Manhattan forever. An English explorer named Henry Hudson was hired by the Dutch East India Company, one of the richest and most powerful trading companies in the world. His mission seemed simple: find a shorter sea route to Asia. European nations were desperate to reach the valuable spice markets of the East. Whoever found the fastest route could become incredibly wealthy. But Hudson never found that passage. Instead, he sailed into a wide, beautiful harbor on the eastern coast of North America. Before him lay an island unlike anything he had ever seen. Dense forests stretched as far as the eye could see. Freshwater rivers flowed through untouched wilderness. Wildlife was everywhere, and the surrounding waters were perfect for trade. Hudson spent days exploring the area, sailing north along the river that would later bear his name, the Hudson River. He returned to Europe with exciting reports. He described a land rich in natural resources, fertile soil, and enormous opportunities for trade. Those reports immediately caught the attention of Dutch merchants. They realized this wasn't just another island. It could become the center of a profitable trading empire. Within a few years, Dutch settlers began arriving. They established a small trading post on the southern tip of Manhattan. They called it New Amsterdam. But no one could have imagined that this tiny settlement would one day become the financial capital of the world. By 1626, the Dutch had already established a growing settlement on the southern tip of Manhattan. But there was one problem. They wanted permanent control of the island. To secure their new colony, the Dutch governor, Peter Minuit, began negotiations with the local Lenape people. According to a letter written years later, Minuit acquired Manhattan in exchange for goods valued at 60 Dutch guilders. Over time, historians converted that amount into what became the famous figure, $24. The story spread around the world. Newspapers, history books, and classrooms repeated the same remarkable claim. The Dutch had bought Manhattan for just $24. It sounded like the greatest real estate bargain in human history. But there was one major problem. Almost every part of that story is debated today. No original purchase contract has ever been found. We don't know exactly what goods were exchanged. And perhaps most importantly, we don't even know whether the Lenape believed they were selling the land at all, because the Dutch and the Lenape had completely different ideas about ownership. What one side believed was a permanent purchase. The other may have understood as a shared agreement to use the land, and that misunderstanding would change history forever. To understand what really happened, we need to see the world through the eyes of the Lenape. Unlike the Europeans, the Lenape did not believe land could be owned forever by one individual. Land was shared. Families hunted on it. Communities farmed it. Rivers, forests, and fields were resources that everyone depended on. Their relationship with the land was based on stewardship, not ownership. The Dutch, however, came from a completely different legal tradition. In Europe, buying land meant permanent ownership. Once a contract was signed, the land legally belonged to the buyer. These two cultures viewed property in fundamentally different ways. That is why many modern historians believe the famous transaction may have been misunderstood from the very beginning. The Lenape may have believed they were granting the Dutch permission to use part of the land, or allowing them to establish a trading settlement. The Dutch believed they had purchased Manhattan forever. Another common misconception is the famous $24 price tag. The original record mentions 60 Dutch guilders, not American dollars. Converting that amount into modern money is extremely difficult. Depending on the method used, historians have estimated values ranging from hundreds to thousands of modern dollars, not simply $24. In other words, the most famous real estate story in history is far more complicated than most people realize. It wasn't just about money. It was about two civilizations with completely different ideas of ownership, law, and land. And that misunderstanding would shape the future of Manhattan forever. The Dutch settlement on Manhattan continued to grow. Merchants arrived from across Europe. Ships filled the harbor. Fur trading became one of the colony's biggest businesses. What had once been a small trading post was quickly becoming an important commercial center. But the Dutch would not keep Manhattan for long. In 1664, English warships appeared in New Amsterdam's harbor. The colony was poorly defended. Rather than risk a devastating battle, the Dutch governor surrendered peacefully. Without a major fight, control of Manhattan passed to England. The English renamed the colony New York. The name honored the Duke of York, who later became King James II of England. Over the following decades, New York grew into one of the busiest ports in North America. Merchants from around the world arrived to trade goods, invest money, and build businesses. One street, originally protected by a wooden defensive wall built by the Dutch, would eventually become famous around the world. That street was called Wall Street. What began as a simple dirt road beside a wooden wall slowly evolved into the heart of global finance. Banks were established. Trading companies expanded. Investors poured in from across Europe and later from around the world. Few people could have imagined that this small colonial settlement would one day become the financial capital of the modern world. But Manhattan's greatest transformation was still yet to come. Over the next 3 centuries, Manhattan experienced an extraordinary transformation. The forests gradually disappeared. Roads replaced dirt trails. Small wooden buildings gave way to towering skyscrapers. Millions of immigrants arrived from every corner of the world, each hoping to build a better life. New York became more than just a city. It became a symbol of opportunity. Businesses flourished, banks expanded, industries grew at an astonishing pace. At the heart of it all stood Wall Street. What had once been a simple colonial street evolved into the financial center of the global economy. In 1792, a group of stockbrokers signed the Buttonwood Agreement, laying the foundation for what would eventually become the New York Stock Exchange. Over the decades, companies from around the world raised billions of dollars there. Investors watched markets rise and fall. Economic booms created fortunes. Financial crises shook the entire world. Yet Manhattan remained at the center of it all. Today, the island is home to some of the world's largest banks, investment firms, multinational corporations, and financial institutions. Every day, billions of dollars move through Manhattan's financial district. Some of the world's most expensive office buildings and apartments stand on land that, according to legend, was purchased for just $24. Looking at modern Manhattan today, it's almost impossible to imagine that it was once covered by forests and inhabited by the Lenape people. But perhaps the most fascinating question is, what would that land be worth today? So, was Manhattan really purchased for just $24? The honest answer is, not exactly. Modern historians agree that the famous $24 story is an oversimplification. The original agreement involved goods worth 60 Dutch guilders and not American dollars. More importantly, the Dutch and the Lenape almost certainly understood the agreement in very different ways. What one culture viewed as a permanent sale, the other may have seen as permission to share or use the land. But regardless of how the agreement is interpreted today, one fact is undeniable. Manhattan became one of the most valuable places on Earth. The island covers just 22.8 square miles. Yet it generates economic activity worth hundreds of billions of dollars every year. It is home to global financial institutions, multinational corporations, world-famous landmarks, and millions of people. Some of the most expensive real estate on the planet can be found on this small island. Apartments sell for tens of millions of dollars. Office towers are worth billions. Businesses from every continent compete for space in Manhattan. Looking back after more than 4 centuries, it becomes clear that the real story was never about $24. It was about exploration, different cultures, trade, misunderstanding, and a series of decisions that helped shape one of the world's greatest cities. History often becomes simplified into memorable stories, but when we look deeper, we usually discover something even more fascinating than the myth itself. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes, the truth is far more valuable than the legend. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more incredible stories from history, geography, business, and finance, subscribe to Thinkverse. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.